Hey, what's up guys? In this guitar lesson we're going to be working on right hand and left hand technique, just the basics to get you started. Now we're going to be learning our first 3 chords so you can start having some fun and playing. Now this is the second lesson in this series, so if this is your first time picking up the guitar, I recommend having a look at my first video here just to get the basics down. Make sure you're holding the guitar right and getting the guitar all in tune. So to start off with, we're going to be working on our left hand technique. So we started this a little bit in the last lesson, but I'm just going to go into a little bit more depth here. So the main things that we're going to be playing when we're starting out on guitar are open chords. Now open chords are simply just chords that use your open strings in there. So that means that not every string has to have a finger down on it. And for most guitarists, this is as far as they ever get, and it's just fine for what they want to do, just playing along to some songs. So with our left hand, we want to keep our thumb fairly straight on the back of the neck. But the main thing we want to focus on here is actually the wrist. Right, so our thumb fairly straight, and we want to keep our wrist nice and relaxed. What we don't want to do is have our palm right up against the back of the neck. We don't want our hand facing downwards from the wrist. That's just going to lead to wrist injuries, and it's really going to restrict your playing. So for your open chords, it's okay to have your thumb over the top of the neck a little bit, but we want to keep that palm nice and low and a fairly straight wrist. You can lower your wrist a little bit so that you've actually got a bit more reach with your fingers there, but we want to keep it nice and relaxed there. As you can see, my thumb here is going over the top a little bit, but not all the way over the top. Again, it's just going to restrict your movement. So nice and straight and a nice comfortable wrist. Now having your thumb over the top like that is going to work fine for open chords, but it's really going to make it difficult when you get to bar chords or any sort of single note playing. So we also want to get used to having our thumb lower on the neck, about halfway up, just a little bit over halfway up. So how we're going to do this is to lower that wrist. So you can see now that my hand from the wrist is actually just at a little bit of an angle. So it's moving upwards a little bit from that wrist. Now lowering the wrist is actually going to give you more space for your fingers to move around. And when we get to bar chords, it's going to make it a whole lot easier. This is actually pretty much impossible if you do have your thumb any higher. Same with your single note playing. If you ever get to soloing or anything like that, you want to have it nice and low so that you can move around a lot quicker. When I have my thumb high, I actually need to move around my whole hand to play those lines, which is a lot less efficient than having it low and I just need to move my fingers. I don't want to confuse you too much though, so to simplify all this, just keep your wrist nice and relaxed and your thumb relatively straight. Now onto our right hand, so I'm going to be teaching you how to do this with a pick at first. Down the track there will be a lesson on finger picking, but for now we're going to be using a pick. Like your open chords, this is what most guitarists will do. Now personally I use a very small pick, a very small pointy pick. There probably isn't a great one to get started on. It is good to try out different picks and see what works for you, but definitely start off with a regular size pick. So when we're strumming the guitar, we want to be using this movement. This is the natural movement of our wrist. We don't want to have to twist our wrist in any sort of weird way. Anything that's a little bit less natural is going to increase the risk of injury. And that's the last thing we want to do. So if we're moving our wrist like this, that means we want the pick to be pointing out of our hand towards the strings. So the way we're going to be doing this, curl your finger around like this, pop your pick in so it's facing downwards, and then pop your thumb over the top. And that's going to put the pick in pretty much the right position. You might have to just readjust a little bit, but it's going to get the basics down. And then as I mentioned, we want to be having that nice natural elbow and wrist motion. Using this as sort of a hinge, and we're just moving our arm in that natural motion there. Then with your wrist as well, doing the same thing. So another hinge here, and just that natural side to side motion there. Now this is a little bit tricky to get right at first, especially if you are just watching a video. I do recommend finding a good teacher to help you out with this because they'll be able to point out if you are doing anything wrong. But if you do have any questions about if you're doing it right or not, make sure to leave that question in the comments below and I'll really do my best to help you out. So now we're going to start on learning chords. So if you look up here, this is what we call a chord diagram. And it's essentially a grid with vertical and horizontal lines. Now the vertical lines are actually our strings. From the far side, that's our 6th string, so our heaviest string. And then the side nearest to me, that's our 1st string, our thinnest string. Then of course, the horizontal lines are the frets. And then we just put our fingers where the dots are. So for this particular diagram here, this is an A. So you'll see we have dots all on the 2nd fret there, right? So if we go from the top, 1st fret to 2nd fret. And then our dots, we're just going to count from the string nearest to me. So 1, 2. So there's a dot there, so we have a finger on our second string, another dot on the third string there, and then another dot on our fourth string there, and they're all in the second fret. So we just want to have our fingers on the fourth, third, and second strings all in the second fret. Now see numbers on the bottom of that, and that's what finger to use. So with our fingers, we have 5 fingers here. Our pointer is our first finger, middle finger is our second finger, our ring finger is our third finger, and your pinky here, that's your fourth finger. So with this A, we have a 1, 2, and 3. So 1 on the fourth string, a 2 on the third string, and then a 3 on the second string. So that means we use our first finger on the fourth string, our second finger on the third string, and our third finger on the second string. Now on top of this diagram, you'll see some crosses and some circles. So a cross means that we don't want to strum that string. A circle means that we are going to strum that string, but we just don't have any fingers pressed down on there. So that's our A chord. Now when we're playing a chord, when we're fingering a note, we want to be pushing into the guitar, right? We want to make sure we're not pushing down on the string at all, or up on the string at all. That's going to change the pitch, and it's actually going to make it harder to actually get the sound that you want out of it. So pushing into the guitar and sort of squeezing it between your finger and your thumb. Now if you do have your thumb over the top a little bit, you'll be pushing it somewhere into there on the back of the neck, which is actually quite a strong position, so it's going to make it a little bit easier. So pushing into the neck, not up or down. So the next chord is going to be a D chord. So now see we have a dot on the third string in the second fret, on the second string in the third fret, and then on the first string in the second fret. Our numbers here are 1, 3, and 2. So that means pop your first finger up on the third string in the second fret, your third finger on the second string in the third fret, and then your second finger on the first string in the second fret. And we've got 2 crosses here on the top 2 strings. So that means we're not going to be strumming the 6th or the 5th string, but we will be strumming the 4th string because it's got that circle there. So for this one, strumming the 4th string down. So we have that A, then we have that D. And finally we're going to learn an E chord. This one's a little bit trickier than those first two because we are using the heavier strings. So there's a little bit more reaching involved. So this one we have dots on the 5th string in the 2nd fret, the 4th string in the 2nd fret, and then the 3rd string on the 1st fret. And we have 2, 3, and then 1. So your second finger up on the 5th string in the 2nd fret, third finger on the 4th string in the 2nd fret, and then your first finger on the 3rd string in the 1st fret. And this time we've got no crosses, just some extra circles, so we're strumming all the strings. Now the other thing that we want to be making sure we do when we're playing these chords is that we're not touching any strings we shouldn't be. That will just deaden the note and make it sound like this. As opposed to this. So to do that we want to make sure that we're using the tips of our fingers. We don't want to be using the pad here because there's no way we won't be able to touch the other strings then. So if you have long nails, it'll make this a whole lot easier if you do trim them, at least on your left hand. Making sure to use the tips of your fingers and have them coming out pretty much at right angles for your chords at least. When you're doing single note stuff, it's not as important because you're just playing the one string at a time. But if you're playing open chords, try to have them pressed roughly at right angles, at least just up to that first joint there. But this is that sort of thing that the more you play, the more you'll sort of figure out how it works for you and how to avoid playing those other notes that you don't want there. So there we go. That's an A, D, and an E. Now these chords are also known as a 12-bar blues. So if you ever hear a blues song in the key of A, there's a high chance it'll be using these 3 chords. But some other great songs that use these chords will be things like Wild Thing, Chasing Cars by Snow Patrol, Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen, even Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond. So a good selection of songs there to work on. Now there are plenty of other songs that if you put a capo on, you'll be able to use as well. But for now, let's just focus on it without the capo. And there we go guys, we're going to leave this lesson there. Tune in for the next lesson where we're going to be going through your first strumming patterns and maybe add a couple more chords in there as well. If you have any questions, pop them down in the comment section below. As I mentioned earlier, this is the sort of stuff that can be quite tricky at first. And it can be super confusing as well. So if you leave your questions there, I'll really try my best to help you out. Leave any comments there as well. Any requests out there for specific things that you want to learn, pop them down there and I'll try to get to it. If you like this guitar tutorial, make sure to like and subscribe. I have new lessons coming every single week. It really helps support the channel. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm Sam. I'll see you next time.